have Jaquie Finn, who's going to be speaking to us on AI, robotics and healthcare, today's trends and tomorrow's opportunities. Jaquie's from Cambridge Consultants, where she's the head of digital health. Over to you, Jaquie.
Morning, everybody. Right. So today, as the slide says, I'm going to talk about AI and how it's impacting the product roadmap for surgical robotics. But I thought it'd be a good idea just to spend 1 minute of this 20 minutes or so telling you why I'm here and why Cambridge Consultants is talking in this area. Some of you may or may not know us. We have been in Cambridge for about 60 years or so now, grown quite considerably over that time. We've got global reach, mostly engineers, scientists and designers, and we tend to be a fee-for-service product development company. We work across lots of different industries, doing project-related developments. Most of our stuff is under IP, so we can't talk about it, and most of our clients give us repeat business time and time again. If we generate our own IP, we tend to spin it out. We've got 28 spin-outs now, 4 of which are multi-billion companies. I work in the medical technology division, running the digital health, which sits across all of the care pathway. So no 2 days are the same for me, no 2 projects are the same. We do lots of regulated class 1, 2 and 3 devices. And we are quite prolific in the area of surgical robotics. Talking about AI today, so I thought it was pertinent just to put up a slide to say we've got about 22 dedicated AI specialists. Some of them have the luxury of being able to do pure research and development. Some of them take that and commercialize it for our clients. We work across the infrastructure industry. We're partners with NetApp and NVIDIA, but also we work with the UK government and ARM. Okay, that's enough about us. So today we're going to talk about the promise of fully automated surgical robots. And when you look at science fiction films, so this is a snap from Ender's Game, you get this idea that it's absolutely fine to have these fully automated robots operating on us. So why aren't we there yet? Why don't we see that sort of thing in the market? And surely that's the promise of AI, right? It's going to help us understand anatomy and structure and help us guide the robot to do the surgery instead of the doctors. So what I want to do today is just kind of drill down into some of the things that influence the product roadmap of all medical devices that get to market, namely AI and regulation. They have a massive impact on what we can bring to market now. And so what I want to do is use surgical robots as the use case, and we'll look into the trends, how they impact the current roadmap and the short and near term, and whether or not we really are going for full automation in surgical robotics. So, trends in AI. I've listed kind of 4 main categories or disciplines of AI. In or decreasing levels of maturity. So we have kind of image processing, which obviously takes in images and tries to understand content, identify insights, etc. Identify kind of images or structures within images. And then we have NLP that Matthew was talking about, understanding content, identifying insights. Continuous signal analysis, where, say, the world of wearables really comes into its fore here, where we're trying to analyze or predict things from signals. And then finally, the most nascent, the most immature of the AI disciplines is intuitive thinking, bringing all of these inputs together, including tabular data, and trying to, I guess in the case of surgical robotics, do some planning. How would a surgical robot know where to make a cut, an incision, put a stitch, put a screw? That would take an awful lot of planning, and we're not there yet. If you look at AlphaGo Zero, so in the gaming world, definitely there's intuitive thinking there, smashed it. But to extrapolate from a game to a human body, we're like miles apart. So let's just drill down into each of these kind of areas. in a bit more detail. So let's have a look at image processing, by far the most mature area, I think, for medtech. So IDXDR on the left-hand side here is the first thing that I think has made an impact in terms of, I guess, smashing the regulatory barrier. We've always used to have AI where the clinician is in the loop to make sure that everything goes okay. And in, I think, 2018, this was a de novo application where it is the first deep learning-based commercial diagnostic system that provides you with a screening, and the clinician does not need to be in the loop at this stage at all. And if it's positive, then it moves to the clinician for care. And I think the threshold that the FDA set for this was something like an 85% sensitivity, and it's at 87% sensitivity and 90% specificity. So that's the first thing where image processing has really overcome a key regulatory barrier. And then the next is data. Normally for image processing, we need loads and loads and loads of data to make inference. And so in 2019, in May, Samsung did a one-shot image processing where they took the Mona Lisa and they basically used transfer learning to take a 2D image and make a 3D representation. And this is massively intuitive, okay, because 3D images have on heads have millions of different parameters. They're from that one shot, and I would say that the algorithm was, or the neural network was trained on lots and lots of facial videos to understand kind of how the face works. But then it was just given that one shot. And it understood that it was a face, it understood how to synthesize speech, understood where the shadows were. So now we don't need as many images to make some really good inference. So if you imagine in surgical robotics, we could get to the point where just a single image allows them to put an enormous amount of extra information on that image. I put this up I think I was in HIMSS in 2018, and this was kind of an interesting fact at the time, and I guess it's like blown it out of the water since then, but there's a lot of data out there. I used to work in bioinformatics in 2000s, and we were always bemoaning the fact that there was lots and lots of data there. So 20 years later, we're still, you know, swimming in a sea of data. Nobody knows what to do with it. Nobody knows how to clean it up properly. It's the 80-20 rule for all the data scientists. All their life is spent cleaning the data. So NLP, as Matthew was referring to earlier, is huge here because it can allow us to take that data and mine it for insight. So obviously we've seen some really brilliant human-machine interfaces that allow us to gain insight with Alexa. And we see some great human-machine interfaces like the chatbots from Babylon Health that we're going to hear about, no doubt, later. And that's, again, all about disrupting primary care and allowing people to deregister from their GP, register onto Babylon Health, and be triaged for hundreds of different common symptoms, be able to have telemedicine when they want it, so the patient is empowered. And it's been a really disruptive digital transformation in the primary care industry, all enabled by NLP. And I put this cartoon up here because I think that this is kind of an all too familiar experience for all of us when we go to our GP. And our GP is absolutely inundated with administrative burdens and overheads, very tight, I guess, time constraints of 10 minutes, I think, per patient. And so often they have to sift through lots and lots of medical records just to understand the context of that visit. So again, NLP has huge, I guess, promise here. And we are seeing things like medical-grade speech recognition software to allow people to push information in a structured, standardized way into EHRs and improve accuracy there. I think we're allowing people as well to be able to digest documentation. I think all of us in the room would love an extra day every week just to be able to gin up on all the journals and all of the sound bites and pieces of information in the industry that we see so that we're really on top of our game, and we never get to do that because there's just too much of it out there. So particularly for medics, NLP allows them to have massively long scientific and clinical journals to be kind of extrapolated into a pithy abstract that gives them insight and decides whether or not it's useful for them. And so this kind of thing to reduce physician burnout is is huge. So I think, again, image processing and NLP have huge benefits for the medical industry. Now, continuous signal processing. Any of us who've got an Apple Watch will know that using ECG and PPG, we can now detect AFib. So that's a kind of a norm these days, that people's vital signs are being continuously monitored. And obviously the AI behind that is crucial for us to understand what's going on. And on the right-hand side is an internal project we did, where what we were trying to do, it's called Verum. I won't talk too much about it now, just due to time constraints, but essentially what we wanted to do is to see if we could design an intelligent clinical trial using AI. And I know that the FDA is trying to push people to include patient-reported outcomes, PROs, in their regulatory submissions, but that's a qualitative response. So how do you quantify that enough for it to be a robust regulatory submission? Well, normally people use clinical biomarkers. But that, if you think about it from the patient's point of view, means that they have to traipse away to the clinic, they have to have lots of invasive procedures, it's single non-contextual data points often, and lots of people drop out just to that hassle. So the question I posed the team was, could we use stress as an example of a PRO? Could we use continuous signal analysis and AI to see if we could get some digital biomarker proxies instead of cortisol? And we were able to take 14 different signals and inputs, all streaming data at various different levels of fidelity. And we used 256 sensor combinations, 4 different machine learning techniques, and we were able to find that a single sensor, EMG or ECG, plus your voice, will really accurately predict your levels of self-reported stress. So again, and that's not special AI, that's not neural networks, that's just good old-fashioned statistical analysis, basically. And I think finally, so I talked about these kind of 3 levels where you can see them really gaining traction in medtech or in healthcare. And again in 2018, this soundbite came, I think it was in the JP Morgan conference, that AI is in such a nascent state, it's very early stage, and I often kind of get slightly exasperated when I hear people say, oh, it's rubbish, it's not done what it needs to do, we just need to give it time. We're really at an early stage, and I think that if you look at the types of AI that's on the market now, like the IDXDR that I said, it's a binary decision, a yes or no on something specific. And we are not really that easy to diagnose as humans. We're very complex. We have socioeconomic determinants and chronic conditions with associated comorbidities and all the omics against all of us to take into account if we're going to properly diagnose somebody. So we're a long way from AI doing that and kind of removing the clinician from the loop. And as well as that, even if we had the AI, at the moment we're still in this data issue where how do you bring all of that data together from the wearables, from the rich data that you get from your phones, your clinical data. And I just want to read you a quick quote from the CEO of Novartis, who I think he was interviewed last month in Forbes. And he was talking about how, AI hasn't really reached its potential yet. He's kind of found it useful in kind of operations and in clinical trials, but it's not kind of been the panacea just yet. And I really relate to this, having worked in bioinformatics. And he talks about, we're spending a lot of our energy just trying to get all of our data harmonized so that some algorithm could maybe find anything of use. And so I think it's just worth us all noting that whilst it's really fantastic, we've just got to kind of maybe not be, just remember we can't run before we need to walk. And walking is very much getting our data all consolidated, standardized and clean. Okay, so that's a quick romp through AI. So now I want to talk about the current trend in surgical robotics. There are 2 main benefits at the moment to surgical robots. One is that they are minimally invasive. So where you often have an open surgery, you can now have like a closed surgery with robots holding the tools and getting into the body with a full range of articulation that the human wrist can't do. So it's much better for surgeons, it's much better for patients because they're their healing time is speeded up and their stay in hospital is reduced. So it's a win-win. I did read that it's only about 2% of procedures that have these robots at the moment. So it's a massively unsaturated market out there. I guess the leader is the Da Vinci robot by Intuitive, but that's huge and really, really expensive. And so you have people like Verb, CMR, Transenterics, and Medtronic snapping on their heels with smaller, portable versions of this, either on or coming to the market. And then you've got image guidance that couples with that. So obviously, if you've got a robot in there noodling away inside the body, the surgeon needs to be guiding it with some really good high-res images. So if you look at those two benefits and how they're coming together, you can see some really good companies on the market. So Corindus, for example, has just been bought by Siemens, is a great robot for basically putting in guide wires for catheters and stents in the heart. And you see that they essentially set it up by the patient, and then the surgeon goes behind a kind of a radiation shield and looks at the image and guides it through. So really great precision engineering and robotics there. If we look at Oris, which has been bought by J&J for many billions, that's, again, a way of taking image overlays, guiding the endoscope through the lungs and looking for pulmonary nodules and doing biopsies. We've got Renishaw's brain stereotactic robot, which allows you to basically place electrodes onto the brain, particularly of use for epilepsy. And then you've got Precise, which is where you've got these robots going into the back of the eye and doing tiny nanometer size movements to kind of move films from the back of the retina, things like that. So again, incredible precision already out there, and there's no AI involved in any of this. There's no need to at this stage. So it's still really, really useful what's going on now in surgical robotics. Okay, so the third piece of the jigsaw, I think, before we bring it all together to kind of how this impacts robotics, are the regulations. And I'm going to be very US-centric here, simply because the US is leading the way on regulations. The FDA has, when Scott Gottlieb came along in 2015, 2016, he really shook everything up. He was incredibly pragmatic. And so I think a lot of people go, oh, you know, there's no regulations, it's very unclear. Well, actually, there are quite a lot of regulations already out there. It's safe to say there are over 50 different AI-enabled devices on the market at the moment that have gone through current FDA regulations. And last year, I think it was, the AI posted some I guess, request for help guidance around what do they do for continuous improvement for AI algorithms that are kind of always learning, because at the moment you can't do that. You have to freeze the algorithm and then bring it out to market. So we've been involved in kind of responding to that, and I just wanted to put the existing regulations out there because I think it's useful to know that there is quite a lot of good stuff. So obviously, for every medical device that's out there, you have all of the risk-based analysis. It's kind of the pillar of this anyway, that everybody works through. AI is software, and software, therefore, also gets very well regulated at the moment. The data that comes from it is very closely regulated and tied down, and there's new guidance on cybersecurity. But it's the continuous improvement that is the issue at the moment, because obviously you set a device out on the market, it collects lots of real-world data, or either clinical trial data, real-world data, whatever it is, and then you can't put it back into that device for the algorithm to learn and be better, because that requires a new submission. And at the moment, you are allowed to do things like just submit documentation if you want to improve security, but anything else, the learning, the making things better for all of us, isn't possible. So this is where the guidance is coming in. So upcoming regulations for AI, there is no need for any more risk-based. We have that kind of well covered, if you like. But essentially, for continuous improvement, what we're seeing is that if you have clinical data that you want to put into the algorithm to make it better, you can have a plus or minus increase of about, say, 10%. They don't know entirely yet, it's just at the guidance stage, where you can decrease or increase accuracy with new data. And so long as you submit that this is the bounds that you're going to increase or decrease accuracy with this new data, and you put in your risk plan and all of your checks and balances, and you make sure that your dev process is exactly the same as it was before, then you will maybe allowed to continuously improve within those bounds. So that's kind of where we are on continuous improvement. So it is moving forward. They do know that they don't want to hinder innovation and learning. And then in terms of pure software, we're trying to make it so that it isn't so onerous to kind of have a class 1 or 2 device go through the FDA each time. They don't want to stifle that innovation either, so we've got this pre-cert program coming along where you can have centers of excellence that will be certified by the FDA that you can go to, and if they are the people that have done the software, then it automatically goes through. Obviously, class 2B and 3 will be going through the usual rigor and checks and balances. Okay, so that's a quick whistle-stop tour through regulations. So let's tie all of this together now for surgical robotics and see how it's all going to impact the roadmap. So I think in the near term, what we're going to see are surgical robotics that will take advantage of these advances in image processing. So the idea of the ability, and we see it here, of an endoscope going down into a bowel and identifying a polyp, being able to overlay not only the kind of the score of the pathology, but kind of continuous information about anatomical things in the area, continuous logging of information. So that image overlay, I think, is a quick win because it's low risk to the patient, it's a huge advance for the surgeon, it's very helpful, and therefore low regulatory burden. They can get that through fairly quickly. So definitely imaging will be the first thing we see in terms of overlays. I think as well, we're going to continue to see robots get smaller. We see, and we can do that now. So on the left-hand side, you see like an articulated arm that's 1.8 millimeters in diameter at the top from a Korean institute, and you see below an articulated robot that we did of the same scale for the eye called Axis. So we know we can make things smaller, which means therefore you need to make cameras smaller for image guidance. And on the right, you can see a 400 by 400 CMOS sensor for cameras, so you can make these smaller too. However, with small cameras come low-res images. So that's where AI is going to come in soon, because we need AI for super res and improved enhancement of accuracy and things like that. So that's going to be an area that we can kind of see moving forward, where hopefully we'll use AI for super res, etc. And then if you bring all of that together, it's that kind of greater understanding of the surgical scenario, so depth information, on getting pre-operative information and building mechanical models around it. This was an Altran, who are the company who owns us. This is one of their collaborations, where this is looking at the internal structures of the liver and just providing huge amounts of guidance for surgeons. So you can imagine this for training surgeons or just for surgery in general. So in conclusion, I think that AI has enormous benefits for all of us, including our surgeons. I think that we need to appreciate the regulatory and technical hurdles that need to be overcome. I think that once they are appreciated and embodied within product roadmaps, we're really going to be able to take advantage of the tech that we have out there. And hopefully that will allow us to move forward with automation. We don't necessarily need it. As I've shown you that there's a lot of really good quick wins that we can do within the current constraints, and particularly with all the kind of new regulatory challenges that AI has coming forward. If anyone wants to ask me anything about anything I've done here, I'm here all day. Again, thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of the day.